Welcome to Echoes of My Imagination. My name is Tracy Lee. Sit back, relax, let me tell you a story. Today's story is called The Valley Instructions, a story for the curious. Let's get into it. At the far edge of a green fold in the land, the valley opened its palms. The river that ran through it did so with a voice, clear, fast near the shallows, and low and steady where pools collected. Reeds rose along the riverbank, their tips feathered, green moving into bronze. When wind passed, the reeds rubbed together and made a thin, papery sound, a steady thread of noise that lay under everything else, like a seam. The houses clustered near the water. They were low and stitched with clay and straw, each roof patched with lichen and field flowers. Light pooled on whitewashed walls in the late afternoon so that the stone paths warmed and the color of the sky deepened to a blue that suggested both sea and distance. Laundry flapped in colors, the deep blue of river clay, the amber of drying apples, the soft green of new dye. The laughter of children threaded through those colors, quick and honest. Animals were not kept as prisoners. Goats grazed the slope in small groups and stepped around the garden beds, careful, as if they were being helpful. A flock of small birds made a habit of inspecting every windowsill for crumbs. They spent their afternoons hopping and turning leaves, like readers searching for a line that mattered. Bees kept their house near the bakery and were given a small basket of herbs as thanks each morning. People spoke to their animals in the same quiet tone they used when they met kin. Near the center of the village, on a round patch of cobbles, stood a stone seat. It was plain and weathered. People knew it had been used once as a place of commands and lists, a point for rulers to speak and others to listen. Over the years, it had collected crumbs, chalk, wine stains, and the initials of children who grew up and returned. The seat was a thing that held weight, but had no will of its own. Beyond that seat, a lantern hung from an oak branch. The light it gave was copper gold at the center, and softened to pale honey as it moved outward. The glow reached the closest flowers and made their petals a darker, velvet purple. It touched the moss at the oak's roots, making the green look like small coins. The lantern changed how faces looked under it, warmth in the cheekbones, steadiness in the eyes. People noticed that the lantern behaved like a simple instrument. When someone spoke kindness there, the glow leaned a little brighter. When someone shouted cruelty too near it, the light thinned and dimmed until the loud voice had moved. Whether the change was a lantern's doing or simply people noticing the same thing at once matters less than what the people did with what they noticed. They lowered their voices, offered bread, or left if they intended harm. The valley had learned to practice. Attention was not free, so they chose carefully where to spend it. The villagers had tools and small rules for testing what mattered. They did not rely on sermons, they tested. When someone claimed that a string of stones hummed a particular tone, the midwife set up a small board, put a tuning plate on it, and struck the stone. She listened with a wooden spoon held in her teeth and watched the simple gauge that counted vibrations. When several people came to the same place and found the same tone, they wrote it down in a log and taught their children to check in the same way. Children called one small round place the listening stone. It was tucked behind the bakery under low fig boughs. When someone sat on it and breathed slowly, the air near their ear had a soft, steady tremor, like a distant drum pulled tight. A man who had worked as a clockmaker in another life measured that tremor with a simple coil and a set of copper wire tied to a box. The box showed small jumps. The jumps were not grand. They were small and consistent. The village treated those jumps like a pulse to follow. The system outside the valley used other tricks. It painted promises in big signs, sold comfort in neat packages, and kept records that made people borrow their future in order to feed today. The system's voices were loud. They wanted attention because attention builds power. The valley did not want to trade songs with loudness. The valley wanted proof. So the valley taught a different habit: test first, tell later. When someone said an idea might call an effect into being, the villagers sat together and wrote down an exact plan: what to measure, with what device, at what time, and how results would be recorded. They used simple tools: a small laser, a dark box, a camera that counted light, a cooled sensor for tiny flashes near a person's skin. They ran blind trials. Sometimes the person intending change was present, and sometimes a shutter inside the box made it so they weren't. Either way, the log showed what happened. When the results repeated, they were shared without spin. Other villages could download the files and run the same tests with the same setup. No gatekeepers. If the test failed, that too was recorded and discussed. The valley respected evidence. It also taught that the size of the effect mattered less than the honesty of the method. Small, clean effects gathered like pebbles and became a map. Natural phenomena taught the same lessons the villagers tried to live. A split in the river, where the water divided to go around a rock and then came back together, left a pattern on the sand that changed if a hand disturbed the stream at the right moment. Light split like that too. When a narrow beam passed through two closed slits, it made stripes where it met a wall, changed the angle, and the stripes shifted. That stripe pattern was not possible unless the lights kept to the same rhythm. The villagers pointed and said, "This is what intent looks like when it becomes visible." The simplest lesson the valley taught was this: attention arranges things. When many people focused on the same small, careful act and followed the same measurement, the small changes that followed stack into steady effects. That was why children could coax a sick hen back to pecking at grain, why a baker's hand slowed and steadied in time with the bread, why neighbors could agree on harvest times with fewer arguments. The valley did not promise miracles. It offered a method: measure, share, repeat. The people were done trading freedom for the loud promises of distant officials. They had found a different path, one that asked for hands and patience and evidence. If the wider world wanted the valley to be useful, neighbors were invited to come, to learn the simple tests, to bring honest instruments, to upload raw files, and to produce the small disciplines of careful attention. At last, a child climbed on the old stone seat. She carried a basket of flatbread, warm and coarse. She sat without ceremony and said plainly, "Is anyone hungry?" The bread was passed. People paused their lists and their orders. A fiddler took up slow tune and matched the heartbeat of the bread passing from hand to hand. Nothing dramatic happened. What happened was steadier. Voices softened. Hands moved with care. And an old ledger was left open on a bench unread while people chose the nearer task of sharing. The valley had found another way of being, a place where attention was used to build, not to bind, where tests were how disputes were resolved, where small, repeatable acts were traded like coins. Its message was simple and sharp. If a system builds itself on promises and attention, hoarded to one point, it can be unwound by giving attention elsewhere, to bread, to honest tests, to the small work that shows up in the log. Those who wished to keep the old, loud ways were allowed to speak their promises. The valley listened, counted, and then offered the workbench. People who chose the bench learned the difference between loud words and steady proof. That was the valley's instruction. Tend the small, measure the effect, Repeat the honest run and share the raw files. Build community, not thrones. Let the light be a toll that shows what care does. The rest, if it mattered, could be tested. And that's it for today. Thank you for joining me for Echoes of My Imagination. My name is Tracy Lee. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and follow, and like, and I'll catch you next time.